Most videos and theories about the Matrix focus on Neo, the Chosen One, the savior who broke the illusion and freed humanity.
It's over! He did it!
Did what?
He ended the war! The machines are gone!
But there's one character whose role often stays in the shadows. We're talking about the Oracle. If you pay close attention to the trilogy, you'll notice that it's actually the Oracle who sets Neo's path, guides the characters, and shapes key events.
So is this the same Oracle that made the prophecy?
Yes.
In this video, we'll dive into whether the Oracle was a real predictor of the future, or if her power was more about subtly manipulating people's choices.
How did you know?
What's really going to bake your noodle later on is, would you still have broken it if I hadn't said anything?
And the big question, what philosophical idea does she represent within the context of the entire movie universe? So, what exactly was the Oracle's real plan? And why might we argue that it was actually her, not Neo, who played the key role in freeing humanity from the Matrix? Of course, this is just a theory, and I'm not claiming to have the final answer. That's for you to decide. Think back to the first scene where Neo meets the Oracle. She says something cryptic.
And don't worry about the vase.
What vase?
And right after that, something happens that seems like a coincidence.
That vase.
It's at this moment that the logical question arises.
Would you still have broken it if I hadn't said anything?
And here's where an interesting detail comes up. If the Oracle hadn't mentioned the vase to Neo, he probably wouldn't have broken it. This immediately reveals the essence of her power. She doesn't just predict events, she shapes them. Her words and actions trigger a chain of events that lead to a specific outcome. This subtle psychological manipulation is the foundation of her entire plan. The Oracle is the author of the prophecy about the One.
So is this the same Oracle that made the prophecy?
Yes.
She's the one who guides Morpheus, nudging him to search for the chosen candidate.
That is why there are those of us who have spent our entire lives searching the Matrix, looking for him.
And when Neo, as a potential chosen one, stands before her, she tells him he's not the one.
I'm not the one.
Sorry, kid.
At first, this might seem like a rejection, but what if her words were calculated? What if, by telling him the truth, she would have broken the chain of events? Just like with the vase.
Would you still have broken it if I hadn't said anything?
Maybe at that moment, Neo wasn't the chosen one yet, but after speaking with the Oracle and under the influence of her words, he became the One. After all, as the movie shows, he's not the only candidate.
These are the other potentials. You can wait here.
And the Oracle's role in choosing the One is way more significant than it first appears. After the vase incident, the Oracle continues her game of influence, shifting the conversation to Trinity.
I can see why she likes you.
Who?
Not too bright, though.
And once again, there's an interesting parallel. A natural question arises. Would Neo have seen Trinity as something more if the Oracle hadn't hinted at fate and love? And would Trinity have fallen in love if she hadn't been led to believe she was meant to fall in love with the One?
Did you go to her?
Yes. The Oracle told me that I would fall in love and that man.
It turns out the Oracle isn't so much an oracle as she is an artificial intelligence capable of influencing the course of events. She doesn't just show the heroes the way, she creates it. This is something the architect later makes clear.
As I was saying, she stumbled upon a solution whereby nearly 99% of all test subjects accepted the program as long as they were given a choice, even if they were only aware of the choice at a near unconscious level.
The system gives people the illusion of choice, while the key decisions are already being guided from the outside.
Would you still have broken it if I hadn't said anything?
And here comes one of the most interesting elements, the cookie the Oracle gives Neo.
Take a cookie. I promise by the time you're done eating it, you'll feel right as rain.
It seems like a simple act of hospitality, but remember Merovingian, he used a similar method.
What you see, I have sent her a dessert. Very special dessert.
He embedded code in food to subtly influence people's behavior.
I wrote it myself. It starts so simply. Each line of the program creating a new effect.
As a result, the person would act in a certain way without even realizing what was behind it.
Soon the why and the reason are gone.
Take a cookie. I promise by the time you're done eating it, you'll feel right as rain.
If we assume the Oracle is using a similar approach, then her cookie isn't just a treat. Maybe at the moment Neo ate it, the program inside him activated, leading him to become the One.
Each line of the program creating a new effect.
This could also explain his resurrection after meeting with Smith. At some point, it's like an internal program in him switches on, and simultaneously, we see how Trinity, who had also interacted with the Oracle, becomes the trigger for Neo's awakening. He comes back to life in his new role.
You can't be dead.
The next time they meet, the Oracle shows him birds, hinting at freedom and control.
Look, see those birds? At some point, a program was written to govern them.
But who is this program controlling now? It's still influencing Neo, but now he doesn't even notice.
Are invisible. You never even know they were here.
She knows about his dreams.
You've seen it in your dreams, haven't you? The door made of light.
Maybe because she's the one who created them. So maybe the One wasn't found. Maybe he was created?
You helped me to get here, but my question is why? Where is this going?
If we continue along this chain of logic, a bolder assumption comes to mind. What if even Agent Smith, in his final form, is also the result of the Oracle's influence? Remember the moment when Smith first breaks free. This happens after his encounter with Neo, when Neo destroys him in the first movie.
I don't fully understand how it happened. Some part of you imprinted onto me, something overwritten or copied.
But instead of dying for good, Smith returns. But now, he's different. He no longer follows the system. He's now an independent entity with an insatiable urge to replicate and consume. He starts copying himself, taking over everyone, like a virus.
A new man, so to speak, like you, apparently free.
What if, through his contact with Neo, and thus directly through the actions of the Oracle, who guided Neo, Smith also ended up under her influence? This could explain the strange phrase he later says, calling the Oracle Mom.
You would know, Mom.
But why would she want to strengthen Smith, one of the most dangerous elements of the system? Maybe this was part of her plan, to create a threat so big that the Matrix itself would be on the brink of destruction. And then, to save the situation, the machines would have no choice but to strike a deal with Neo, since only he could destroy Smith.
The program Smith has grown beyond your control. You cannot stop him. But I can. What do you want? Peace.
In other words, the Oracle created an enemy that only the One could defeat. So she wasn't just guiding Neo, she was preparing a global power shift. In the third movie, we see the Oracle again, baking cookies. But this time, she doesn't manage to finish them before Neo arrives.
Cookies need love like everything does. I was hoping to have these done before you got here.
And it seems like this isn't a coincidence. The cookie isn't for Neo, it's for Sati and Seraph.
Take the bowl to Seraph and find out if they're ready. Take a few cookies and go with Seraph.
Once again, it's a symbol, code, influence, a trigger. When Smith bursts into the Oracle's room, the first thing he does is smash the cookie plate against the wall. He understands that this is part of the plan. He thinks he's figured out her scheme, and that's why he sees himself as the winner.
Maybe you knew I was going to do that. Maybe you didn't.
He asks a direct question.
If you did, that means you baked those cookies and set that plate right there deliberately, purposefully.
If the Oracle knew he was coming, why didn't she escape?
But if that's true, then why is she here if she knew I was coming?
But, as before, the answer is deeper. It's all part of the script. The Oracle sacrifices herself, allowing Smith to consume her.
Do what you're here to do.
Why? Because Smith rejects all external influences. He won't give in to either the cookie or the words, but through the Oracle's sacrifice, he becomes the carrier of the virus she embedded in him.
Everything that has a beginning has an end.
The final moment confirms this. Neo faces Smith. Smith says,
Everything that has a beginning has an end.
And it's only after those words that Neo realizes what he needs to do, and he sacrifices himself. The system is rebooted, and Smith disappears. Everything happens exactly according to the Oracle's plan, and And here, perhaps, lies the main proof that this entire story isn't just about Neo, but about the one who stood behind the scenes of his fate. In one of the final shots, we see a very symbolic moment. At the same place where Neo once lay defeated, now lies the Oracle. This is a visual marker. By replacing him, she completes her plan.
What do you want? Peace. What do you want?
I want the same thing you want, Neo.
The end of the war. Peace.
And the system is rebooted, and with it, the entire matrix structure. The architect confirms what has happened with his last words.
You played a very dangerous game.
Change always is.
Just how long do you think this peace is going to last?
The people are free. Those who want to leave can do so. Peace has been achieved, but at what cost? The Oracle understood from the very beginning that to end the war, a sacrifice was needed, balance, precise calculations, and a multi-move game. She guided each participant, from Morpheus to Seraph, from Trinity to Neo himself. She didn't just predict events, she shaped them. She programmed the Matrix itself, making it move in the right direction. Neo, without a doubt, was the key figure. But all his choices, his entire trajectory, they were the result of the Oracle's influence.
You were told to come here and then you obeyed. It is, of course, the way of all things.
And when you look at it from this perspective, it becomes clear. She was the true savior, not the one fighting on the front lines, but the one who quietly builds all the connections, coordinates the actions, and at the right moment sacrifices herself for the higher goal. The Oracle is not just a program. She is the archetype of wisdom. She is the shadow behind the Chosen One. One of the most debated questions in the trilogy is the Oracle's ability to predict the future. We all know her famous line in the third movie, and if we take her word for it, she didn't know how everything would end.
Did you always know?
Oh, no. No, I didn't.
But can we trust her? And why, if she's so wise and influential? Didn't her predictions always come true down to the last detail? Let's first break down who the Oracle really is. She's not just a wise old woman pulling the strings behind the scenes. The Oracle is a program.
I'd say you're a program from the machine world. But if that's true, that could mean you are part of this system. Another kind of control.
Part of the Matrix system, created to balance the equations and give people the illusion of choice. And this is exactly what the architect says when he explains her role.
As I was saying, she stumbled upon a solution whereby nearly 99% of all test subjects accepted the program as long as they were given a choice, even if they were only aware of the choice at a near unconscious level.
But how can such a program predict the future? To answer this, we need to look at the philosophical concept of determinism. This theorem states that every event in the world is the consequence of a prior event. And if you know all the causes, you can predict the consequences. Practically, if there was a program that could analyze the state of all the bytes and elements of the matrix system at any given moment, it would see how events should unfold. This is determinism in action. If the system knew all the initial data, it could predict the future with certainty. The worldview shared by Merovingian, one of the most prominent characters who embodies the philosophy of determinism,
Causality. Action, reaction. Cause and effect.
Is a world where everything is programmed, and every detail inevitably leads to the next. It's like a chain of dominoes, where each event is a consequence of the previous one. Merovingian, like the Oracle, works with this determinism, except that unlike her, he tries to control everything. Now imagine a program that can analyze all the information in the matrix. The position of every byte, every character, all objects, all actions. If such a program existed, it could create a complete picture of the world. And then, in its eyes, the future wouldn't be uncertain. It would be just as clear and understandable as the past. The Oracle is probably that very program. She can predict the future because she has access to this information. But here's the catch. She doesn't just predict the future. Her task isn't to provide exact forecasts. She has access to a vast database and can calculate probabilities, but her real role is to influence events. She can guide the development of events, but she also has to account for people's choices and their free will. And here's where it gets interesting. While the Oracle has incredible predictive abilities, she can't fully control everything. Because despite the determinism, there's still an element of unpredictability in the Matrix. Those are the moments when characters, including Neo, make choices. And those might be the moments the Oracle couldn't predict with absolute certainty. Now, listen to another statement and compare it to the previous one. The mind, which would at any given moment know all the forces that move nature and the positions of all the bodies that compose it, if it were also vast enough to analyze this data, could embrace with a single law the movement of the greatest bodies in the universe and the smallest atom. For such a mind, nothing would be unclear, and the future would exist before it just as the past does. This statement essentially repeats the idea mentioned earlier. However, it's not just a phrase, but a quote from Pierre-Simon Laplace himself, a French mathematician, physicist, and astronomer who was a supporter of absolute determinism. This is quite a famous thought by the scientist, in which he describes the concept known as Laplace's demon. Laplace's demon is a thought experiment proposed by Laplace in 1814, which embodies the main idea of absolute determinism. According to this theory, if there existed a mind that had complete knowledge of all the initial conditions for every particle in the universe and all the natural laws, it could predict the future with absolute accuracy, as well as explain any event from the past. This is a kind of ideal of determinism, where randomness doesn't exist, and all events are linked by cause and effect chains. Laplace emphasizes that uncertainty and randomness only exist because of the limitations of our information or computational abilities. In his theory, if we could obtain all the information about a system, there would be no more randomness. Every event would have a clear cause and effect. This concept is a key element of the philosophy of determinism and serves as a foundation for understanding how we can look at the future in the context of the Matrix. So, it turns out that the Oracle is, in a way, the embodiment of Laplace's demon. However, if the Oracle knows all the initial data about the system, then why couldn't she predict how everything would end?
Did you always know?
Oh, no. No, I didn't.
Why, despite her ability to forecast the future, could she not give a precise answer about the final outcome? The answer is simple. Laplace was wrong. With the development of quantum mechanics and the discovery of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, the idea of absolute determinism was challenged. Modern physics asserts that at the microscopic level, there is a fundamental uncertainty that cannot be eliminated by improving measurement or computational methods. This discovery changed our understanding of the universe and the processes within it. The most vivid example of this is the uncertainty principle, which states that it is impossible to precisely measure a pair of quantities, like the position and velocity of a particle, at the same time. This concept shows that there is a fundamental unpredictability in our world at the smallest levels, making the possibility of fully predicting events much more complicated. The architect, in his attempt to create a system where all events are predictable, runs into the issue that his formulas cannot account for this uncertainty.
While this answer functioned, it was obviously fundamentally flawed, thus creating the otherwise contradictory systemic anomaly.
He tries to describe the world through equations and calculations, but no matter how hard he tries to refine them, what he cannot control remains. The future is unpredictable. As Neo himself says,
Choice.
The problem is choice. The architect faces the fact that the freedom of choice the characters experience becomes a barrier to predicting events. This is why, despite her ability to predict the future with available accuracy, the Oracle did not know how everything would end. She can predict nearly everything, but when it comes to choice, that element becomes unpredictable. Notice the moment when the Oracle predicts that Neo will come to the architect.
You've seen it in your dreams, haven't you? The door made of light.
That he will be standing by his door.
What happens when you go through the door?
She knows exactly what will happen in that moment, but what happens beyond the door, what decision he will make, and what will transpire there, she does not know. This moment highlights that, despite the Oracle being a very powerful program, her knowledge is limited because she cannot predict the choices that will be made. For her, the future is not just an equation to solve, but a complex process where personal freedom plays a key role. If you enjoyed this review and want more content like this, you can easily influence that. Just hit the like button below this video and we'll know you're interested in more topics like this. If you're here for the first time, I want to let you know that there are other videos on the channel dedicated to the Matrix universe. For example, we have an in-depth breakdown of the characters Neo and Agent Smith, which you definitely shouldn't miss. All the links to these videos are in the description, and right now a playlist will appear on the screen with all of our related content.